In today's episode, I'm going to tell you everything we know about the disappearance of Jennifer Kesse. Jennifer was a bright, beautiful, and successful woman who disappeared over 16 years ago. Her family has been very involved in her case, but I can't say the same about the police. In fact, they've neglected Jennifer's case to the nth degree, ignoring hot leads and failing to take notes along the way. This case is very frustrating, and I'm hoping by sharing the known details with you all, we might be able to find more answers and bring Jennifer home. On January 24th of 2006, Joyce and Drew Kesse got a phone call that their 24-year-old daughter Jennifer didn't show up for work and wasn't answering her phone. This wasn't like Jennifer at all. She always had her phone on, and now it was going straight to voicemail. With no time to spare, Joyce, Drew, and their son Logan hopped in the car and started the 2-hour drive to Jennifer's condo in Orlando, Florida. When the Kesses arrived, they were a bit relieved. It didn't seem like anything bad had happened. It was still wet in the shower, makeup was out on the bathroom counter, and the shirt she wore to bed that night was on her bed. Her phone, keys, and purse were missing, as was her car. So it really seemed like Jennifer left the house in a bit of a rush on her own accord. But why didn't she go to work? And why was her phone going straight to voicemail? Well, as the day turned into evening, the panic set in. Jennifer still wasn't answering her phone, and no one knew where she was. The Kesses reported their daughter missing, and a search began. 2 days later, Jennifer's Chevy Malibu was found abandoned in an apartment complex about a mile away. This gave investigators and family members a lot of hope. Since they found Jennifer's car close by early on, surely they'd be able to find Jennifer, right? Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. There was no real evidence inside of the car, and it didn't seem like anything had been stolen either. But when the Kesses saw the images of Jennifer's car, they had a terrible feeling. There was what looked like a hand mark running across the hood of the car. Drew Kesse said it looked like someone was thrown down on the top of the hood, arms spread out, and then dragged back, almost like off the hood, to the point where you can almost see fingers scribbling down the hood. Since there were security cameras at this apartment complex, the authorities decided to review them in hopes to find clues about the case. Sometime around noon, the day Jennifer vanished, an unknown person was seen driving Jennifer's car in the lot and parked it. After they parked, the unknown person sat in the car for about 30 seconds before walking away. Now, you'd think the authorities were able to get a good look at who this person was, but you'd be wrong. The cameras at this complex weren't the greatest. They didn't actually record continuous videos. Instead, they took a photo every 3 seconds that were strung together like stop motion. But it just so happens that every 3 seconds, this person's face was covered by a fence post. Well, isn't that amazing? I didn't even know they made cameras like this, honestly. The only thing investigators were able to gather about this person was the guess that it was a male dressed in workman's clothes. The lead detective on Jennifer's case theorized Jennifer was abducted that morning as she was walking towards her car. Based on the known evidence, it seemed like Jennifer woke up that morning, showered, got ready for work, left her condo, and headed to her car. During the walk from her condo door to her car, that's where she must have been kidnapped. I guess there weren't cameras around her building. This was in 2006, so the security camera thing wasn't as big, but man, I wish it was. Footage from Jennifer's condo would have helped out big time. The Kesses were absolutely devastated about Jennifer and didn't fully trust the investigators would work hard enough on her case. And they're right. So the family legit moved into Jennifer's condo so they could be closer to the case. Wow, the Kesses sound like a great family. I'm glad Jennifer had them working on her case so hard. Before we get further into the investigation, let me give you some background information on Jennifer. Jennifer was doing very well for herself. She'd just gotten promoted to project manager of a timeshare company and recently moved to her condo in Orlando that she paid for herself. Jennifer was dating a guy named Rob who lived 3 hours away in Fort Lauderdale. So they were doing the whole long distance thing. As hard as it may have been, Jennifer and Rob had a real connection. They would do whatever they needed to make their relationship work. Every other weekend, they'd meet up to see each other. A week before Jennifer disappeared, she and Rob went on a trip to St. Croix. I think by this point, they'd been dating for about a year, so so things were getting pretty serious. On Monday, January 23rd, which was a day before Jennifer disappeared, she called her mom. Jennifer told Joyce all about her trip and sounded happier than ever. She also called Drew and Logan later. That night at 10 p.m., Jennifer and Rob talked on the phone, and it wasn't a pleasant phone call. Rob said he and Jennifer got into a fight. The troubles of being long distance were eating away at them, and it turned into a disagreement. It's unclear who was arguing what, but this is definitely a red flag. Having a fight with your GF the night before she disappears is not a good look. I'm sure the police looked into Rob as a suspect, but from what I've gathered, there's no evidence pointing to him as the perp. Another person or group of people theorized to be involved were the workers at Jennifer's condo. The Kesses said that their daughter told them about how uncomfortable the employees at her building made her feel, and a few of them did some work in Jennifer's condo the week before she disappeared. It's unclear if the police looked into this lead back then. Unfortunately, it would be years before there were any major updates in Jennifer's case. So about 3 years into the investigation, one of the detectives, Detective Wright, decided to revisit Jennifer's case from the very beginning. He went back through the evidence, the timeline, and brought in some people for more interviews, which were recorded. Detective Wright spoke with a former housekeeper from Jennifer's complex, who provided a very hot lead. Detective Wright showed the housekeeper the security camera photos of the unknown driver who parked Jennifer's car that day. He asked the housekeeper if she knew who that man was, and she said yes. He looked like someone from the complex named Chino. So Chino was a guy who lived in the same complex as Jennifer. He was also a maintenance guy there. Do you remember how I said Jennifer got some work done to her condo the week before? Yeah, Chino was one of those workers who made some of the repairs. Detective Wright also learned of a tip about Chino made on an anonymous crime line during the first week of the investigation. And yet no one pursued Chino back then? That's so frustrating. Detective Wright tracked down this Chino guy so he could interview him. At this point, it was the spring of 2009, and Chino was in jail for forcing himself on a woman. It seems like this might be our guy. Detective Wright asked Chino about Jennifer, and he said he had no idea what happened to her. He told Detective Wright about the time he repaired something at Jennifer's condo, saying everything was normal about the interaction. She let him in, he performed the repair, and left. Chino was hooked up to a polygraph test that day, and he passed it. Okay, so he's not our guy. Shortly after that, Detective Wright was removed from Jennifer's case. He was reassigned to others that needed his attention. This was a huge bummer because, as you can tell, Detective Wright worked on Jennifer's case very hard, and there's no telling how his colleagues would handle it from there. In 2016, Jennifer was declared deceased because 10 years had passed since her disappearance. By this point, the Kesses had reached a boiling point with the investigators. They felt as if they weren't doing enough to solve their daughter's case, so they decided to hire a private investigator to aid their efforts to find Jennifer. The family requested a digital copy of Jennifer's case files, but this blew up into a huge legal battle. It seems as if the Orlando PD didn't want to hand over the documents because they didn't really have much. Why? The lead detective on Jennifer's case didn't write a single report since 2010. Like, are you kidding me? What was this detective doing all those years? Because of this, the Kesses sued the OPD. Months later, they reached an agreement that the OPD would hand over documents, videos, and audio recordings over 4 months. In exchange, the Kesses had to pay $18,000, and the OPD wouldn't lead the investigation any longer. Right now, there is no law enforcement agency actively working on Jennifer's case, so it's just friends, relatives, and the private investigator. Isn't that BS? Now, the Kesses conduct their own research, and when a lead presents itself, they show it to a law enforcement agency and request an action to be made. Like, we found this clue about this location. Can you send a search team out there? The reason the Kesses can't work entirely independently from the authorities is because it would mess with the prosecution's case, especially in the realm of investigating suspects. Gosh, that's so irritating. The Kesses are the only ones willing to do the work. work, but they can't technically do it all? Makes no sense. Well, the Kesses raised funds to pay the $18,000 for the evidence, but the OPD didn't hold up their end of the bargain. It took them way over 4 months to send over the digital files for her case, something around like 10 months. Drew put it best when he said they've spent several years fighting against the machine that is Orlando politics. But despite their many obstacles, the Kesses scoured the evidence received and were able to generate some new leads. The Kesses' private investigator, Michael, found out about a concerning sighting that happened 10 months after Jennifer's disappearance. Someone was seen dumping a big rolled up carpet piece in a lake near Jennifer's condo. Whoa, why did they dump carpet in a lake instead of the trash? That's suspicious. When Michael found out one of Jennifer's neighbors just got new carpet the day after the disappearance, he grew even more suspicious. The Kesses reached out to the police and requested a search of the lake in November of 2019. The authorities sent out a dive team on 3 separate occasions but found nothing in the lake. Michael couldn't get this tip out of his head though, and can you blame him? It really seems to add up to a probable theory. Michael talked to some of the people from Jennifer's complex. Based on what they told him, he concluded that somewhere around 10 maintenance guys were secretly living in an empty unit across from Jennifer's. He believes one of them abducted and executed her, rolling her up in the old carpet and tossing her in the lake to dispose of the evidence. And the police said the mysterious driver of Jennifer's car was wearing a workman's outfit, so this seems highly likely. Within the past few years, there have been several mainstream true crime shows and podcasts that have covered Jennifer's case. This includes Oxygen's Up and Vanished, Dr. Oz, and Fox's House of Broken Dreams. Drew said the series of episodes on the House of Broken Dreams podcast, which was released in 2021, generated a few new tips. He said, "I have great hope that really by the end of the year, we truly might know where Jennifer is or the true direction in which we have to fight to get her." He also said the episodes were very well done, so if you're a podcast person, check it out. The Kesse family is not giving up on Jennifer's case, and they never will. They have created a GoFundMe to raise money that will go directly towards Jennifer's investigation. They also set up a Facebook page and website that includes details about the case and ways to get involved. The family constantly gives updates and shares words of gratitude to everyone who has gotten involved online. Without that continued support, we would not be able to continue the fight in trying to find her. We know that it is the public that in most cases solves or helps missing people be found. We've seen it time after time again with long-term missing persons cases. So we ask for your continued vigilance in helping our efforts to bring Jennifer home, the family wrote in an update online. But as thankful as the Kesse family is to everyday civilians and armchair detectives helping with the case and donating to the cause, they are extremely frustrated by the lack of care and effort coming from the law enforcement. The Kesses stated, "We firmly believe the department's negligence and lack of competency cost Jennifer the chance to be found." It's always difficult to think that way, but it's very true. The Kesse family told the authorities about the condo workers early on. Law enforcement ignored the tip about the rolled up carpet years prior, and the lead detective took no notes for over 12 years. That's unforgivable and honestly embarrassing. I hope the OPD has gotten their act together since then, but it doesn't really seem like they have. If you have any information about Jennifer's case, the Kesses ask that you call the tip line or reach out to them online at jenniferkesse.com or through the Find Jennifer Kesse Facebook page. If you don't have information but want to help in another way, consider sharing this episode or donating to the GoFundMe page. Well, everyone, that's all for now. Can you believe how frustrating this case is? I really hope the Kesses get answers soon because they deserve some closure. Now, I'm gonna go decompress for a bit and I'll see you next time on Killer Bites.